Hello, my name is Mark Goodman, and I'm going to be talking today about neighbourhood plans. I'm going to be taking you through what is a neighbourhood plan and all the things that it can do and the good it can do, what it is specifically, how it can be good for your local community, and how the process, broadly speaking, can be run within the village that you're in. So first of all, what is a neighbourhood plan? Well, there's a number of descriptions about what a neighbourhood plan is. This is quite a good one, which is the explanation from the CPRE. A neighbourhood plan is a new way of helping local communities to influence the planning of the area in which they live and work. It's well worth picking out a couple of words within that which really are quite significant. Those are local communities influence planning. Over the last number of years, this has sort of worked, but the whole process of planning has been very combative, and the government have been trying to put in ways where local communities do have a very positive input into that, rather than being very defensive when a developer comes in, for example, to put new buildings or new housing in a particular area, and it's caused a lot of stress and anxiety. And the Localism Act, which came out in 2011, and the following set of legislation has been very effective in trying to do something about this. So it's very government orientated, very much the government have been trying to positively influence the way that planning works from now on. And it's actually quite new in that respect. But what a neighbourhood plan can actually do is quite interesting and potentially very powerful. So let's have a look at a few of those. One of those is to develop a shared vision. First thing we've got to do is this can't be just a few of the great and the good within a village or community and just having their particular say on what they want or what they want to build near them or what they don't want to build near them. What we need to develop is a shared vision about what the whole community would desire for that. And that's a good part of the work in developing a neighbourhood plan, is trying to come up with something that actually people want to share with each other. One of the other things about is choosing where new homes or shops or offices or other developments should be built. After all, the neighbourhood plan is about land use planning. So this is particularly important. Neighbourhood plans don't have to have a geographic limit or be mapped, but quite often they do, and they can do that. So where these go is actually quite significant locally. One thing it can't do, which we'll talk about later, is actually say perhaps the numbers that go in, but certainly what they can do is to start to say, well, if we're going to have some housing, we can have them here, here, and here, perhaps. Equally, those numbers can be increased from what perhaps local government wants to happen. Identify and protect important local green spaces. So certainly within a rural setting, that is really important. Local green spaces are important, but they mustn't be a mandate for saying what we don't want. This is meant to be a very positive process. So identifying and protecting important green spaces is about actually local people saying these areas are important to us and this is how they're used, which is equally as important as where local housing or local shops might go, and it can be very much instigated into that planning process. One of the things that also a neighbourhood plan may do is influence what buildings should look like. Again, there are broad guidelines within the planning system already, but actually putting it into a neighbourhood plan about specific things is quite an issue. We've got to be careful to a certain extent how far we go with this, because extra design and extra things can be very off-putting to developers if that's what you want, but equally it can add cost into that if we go too far. But equally, particularly with local distinctiveness, this is quite an important issue. One of the things that's caused a fair amount of confusion is in fact that neighbourhood plans are similarly named, if nothing else, to some other plans, and there are lots of strategies and plans, etc., that are being produced all the time. And one of the issues that we need to be careful of is that this is actually quite a distinct type of plan. So let's just pick out one particular one which is commonly confused with. And this is community-led plans. So we're talking about neighbourhood plans, What we need to be careful of is not getting confused with a community-led plan. And a community-led plan can also be called a parish plan or a town plan sometimes, and all sorts of things. We're talking about a neighbourhood plan, but let's compare this with a community-led plan which is produced. A neighbourhood plan is primarily about the development of land and buildings. Planning is what it's about. It's very distinctly about that. Although even then we have to be careful that it's not just about housing, for example. A lot of things influence where things go and vice versa. One thing that it is backed by is government legislation. Localism Act 2011 and the legislation, I think there's 10 pieces of legislation that have followed that during 2012 and very specific about that. If we look at a community-led plan though, there is no real government legislation which backs it up. It doesn't necessarily have any leverage, and it does talk about a lot of other issues as well as land use planning. But that's a good thing too, because it frees that a particular type of plan to talk about anything it wants to talk about, and it's left locally. In this case, with a neighbourhood plan, it's very specific about what it's talking about and what it needs to actually address. Within a neighbourhood plan, it must conform to legislation. So, for example, if there are certain environmental concerns or issues which are going on, and these are laid down in law already, we cannot conflict with those. We can talk about them and actually the influences locally, but there may be things environmentally to do with protected species or protected landscapes. It cannot go above those and usurp those particular policies, for example. Equally, it can't conflict with strategic policies of the core strategy. Now, the core strategy is the new type of, well, it's a set of documents, but it's the legislation that guide planning within a planning area. So that could be a unitary authority, or in some cases it would be a county authority or wherever, or a district authority more like. So it cannot conflict with the strategic policies of that core strategy. But what it can do, where, for example, a strategic policy may say over a wide area the numbers are this, what a neighbourhood plan can do is say, well, okay, if we accept those numbers or want to increase those numbers, that's possible. But what we can do is start to say where those numbers may go within our local community. And that's actually a very important distinction as opposed to the old type of strategy that used to be produced. In this particular case, we have a neighbourhood plan which is broadly called NUVI, and NUVI is just an abbreviation for its proper title, which is the North East Wiltshire Villages Neighbourhood Plan. In fact, it's even longer than that, not just the North East Wiltshire Villages Neighbourhood Plan. It's actually a thing called a front runner, which means it gets it gets money from central government, and it's actually called the North East Wiltshire Front Runner Neighbourhood Plan. So NUVI is just an easier way to say that, really. Okay, so let's just talk about NUVI then in that case. Well, NUVI covers 7 villages which have come together. It was initially a larger set of villages and a couple of towns involved, but that initially just became very unwieldy in the way that it was operating. And in fact, just by mutual agreement, and a very friendly agreement I might add, it was decided that the 7 villages, Royal Wootton, Bassett, Cricklade, would do their own because of the dynamic of those places, and that's absolutely fine. And the 7 villages themselves would get together. There's a number of things they have in common which they can talk about. They also have their individual things which they can also talk about. From each of those villages, the steering group, which actually drives this process, is made up from a parish councillor for each of them. And where there is a community planning group, there's a member of the community planning group on that steering group. And that steering group drives the process on. We, as Common Places, own the fact that the project manager, and our boss is, if you like, the steering group driving that process. What will happen is each village will create a plan of its own. It will have its distinct issues, distinct things that it needs to concentrate on and think about, where things might go, the types of issues that affect it. What will happen is that the issues will be drawn from a set of consultation and engagement, but also from community-led plans and other documents and other local things that come out from the various engagement and consultation processes. Having set out their own plan, that will be taken back to the local community. So do you agree with what this comes on? And we'll have a smaller poll there to say, within a sort of a little mini referendum, if you like, within each of those places, do people agree with what we think that people have agreed with? They can say yes. What we will also do is set some options out, because no doubt there will be options in the way that we create that. Having done that, each will have its own little mini plan. What we will then do is to start to discuss and relate, are there common issues within the villages? And it would seem logical that if one village is next to another village, that actually there will be a number of those. If we think about roads do drive from one village to the next village. And if there are issues and policies that need to be dealt with in a group, that's fine. We have some of those villages that are near Swindon, for example, so there will be pressures from Swindon, which will be more at one end of our group than the other end. So policies may well be individual to that place, which is absolutely fine, or they may be shared, and neither of those are more important than the other. It's just really the way that we deal with them as we take them on to be policies and put pressures on. As far as doing this as a group, there are economies of scale that we can make. In the end, the grant that has been received from local government is only to a certain extent. And this was really the only way that we would, particularly the smaller of the parishes, would have been able to have coped with actually even doing a neighbourhood plan. And so that was quite important. Okay, so in broad terms, what needs to happen to create the plan? Well, we have a work plan which goes on. It will take probably from this point probably nearly a year before we can get to the end. So we have a work plan, but in broad terms, what does that cover? Well, one of the things that's happened is the application to even become a neighbourhood plan area. It has to be agreed by local government, particularly as a group. Is it agreed that should happen? And as I do this presentation, we've got to the point where this consultation was set out within the various villages, and the neighbourhood area went up for consultation. Wiltshire Council, in fact, ran that process themselves, and representations could be made at Wiltshire Council through a particular portal or website, if you like, where people could link through and make their representations to the local authority. So that was the first process while things were being set up and staged. Then there's the main core of this is actually to develop the plans. Well, there's a number of plans, and then there'll be an overriding plan as well. So that to develop the plan, and so proposals, policies, options will be involved in this, and a huge part of that will be the engagement and the involvement of local people, consulting, talking, bringing things back, and all of those sorts of issues. Really, really important to the whole process that we keep coming back to the local community to talk about the issues and processes, as they've been very important as part of the process. All of that will go back to Wiltshire Council, because after all, the whole point of this is actually the document is to become part of the core strategy, not some side document that is referred to, but actually core of actually any planning application it will be referred to. So of course they need to go through quite robust processes themselves, and one of these is that it needs to go to independent examination, where a man will come in and say, actually, has things been done robustly and fairly? Make sure that that's done right. There, as I said before, there are a number of sets of legislation, so those hoops need to have been jumped through. Make sure we do it all right. And in fact, that's a good thing, because it means that later on, should there be arguments for developers in the future, etc., we can make sure that that's happened. Also, part of the engagement process will have been that there are a set of statutory consultees. Landowners are included in that, but equally there are statutory bodies like the Environment Agency and the neighbouring councils and all those sorts of people. And we need to make sure that that's been done correctly, and the examiner will be looking at that, say, have we made sure we've included all the people that we needed to have included in that? And even though we've done a local poll of people to make sure that they agree with what was done in their local area, a little mini referendum if you like, there is then a bigger referendum at the end concerning the whole of the area. Again, there's been a number of checks and balances earlier on. It would have gone back to the various parish councils for them to agree with this. So there's a number of places at which it pauses and we send it back. Do we all agree? Do the community agree? Do the parish agree? But the ultimate version of this is actually a referendum at the very end, to which we will make sure that that's done. So during this introductory presentation, what we did was we did a number of exercises with people. So today was when we did this consultation process back in February and March, and we went through a process which we will publish, which was about a postcard event about where people just put their own personal view of the future, and we did some issues work and some mapping in groups in the various places. This will carry on. The engagement process and the consultation process will carry on. One of the concerns that we've had since we did these presentations was young people. Very few young people came through the doors, so we're going to get online, we're going to get to the schools and do all of this to make sure that we get enough proper engagement and consultation with people. So I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. We've got a lot more work to do, but this gives you some idea of the presentation that we did at the time. And watch this space, so to speak. Thank you very much.